As we all take pride in India's glorious journey of 75 years of independence, Sansad TV celebrates the said splendid milestones by staging a unique program named 75 Years Laws That Shaped India, an extraordinary knowledge-driven program showcasing some selective landmark laws that were adopted during these golden years. I'm your host Hemant Batra, back again with another episode. Today we will be discussing the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009. In short, the Right to Education Act. The act which signifies that the values of equality, social justice and democracy and the creation of a just and humane society can be achieved only through the provision of inclusive elementary education to all. And to discuss this milestone law, we have with us Vrinda Sarup, a highly accomplished former IAS officer who has served as Secretary to Government of India in the Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Human Resource Development, now known as Ministry of Education. She has worked in the sector of education for more than 2 decades, both in the central and state governments. Welcome, Vrinda ji, to the discussion.
Thank you.
And we also have amongst us Geeta Luthra, a very well-known senior advocate in the Supreme Court of India. She has landmark judgments in various fields to her credit and has successfully defended rights of several members of society, including women, children, and transgenders. Welcome, Geeta, to the panel discussion.
Thank you.
So let us begin the discussion, and let me start with you, Geeta. Geeta, the title of this law, what we are discussing, is self-explanatory. It's Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education. And the title is about a fundamental right, which is envisaged in Article 21A. How does this fundamental right get into the framework of the statute? If you could explain in some simple words for our audience.
So the interesting part is that obviously right to life in its own essence, and the argument was made in the courts that right to life includes a right to education. And so came the Supreme Court judgment in Unikrishnan. This was in fact followed in 2002 by this Right to Education Act. And it was one of the fundamental duties under Article 39 and I think 45. And we've got
Directive Principles of State Policy.
Directive Principles of State Policy, which are fundamental duties in its own way, which are what we want to go towards, but which we couldn't have totally put into a fundamental right. Now we have thankfully got it as a fundamental right, this right to education, and we are taking little baby steps towards it because we've assured it, or we are seeking to ensure this by this enactment for children aged 6 to 14.
6 to 14, right.
And so the entire endeavor is that there should be this education for children for this age, 6 to 14. So with that will come schools which will provide that education. With that will come responsibility for the government. And with that will come the fact that if a child who does not have admission for whatever reasons, you will try and bring in within the network all children. But suppose some children, for whatever reason, flay off, or their parents do not send them to school, then the idea is that to get them elementary education, they are brought into the school framework, whatever their age is, and given that elementary education which is being given to children for 6 to 14
14
years.
years. Right. Geeta was talking about responsibilities. So she's right, in a way, the right to education will become meaningless if the facilitating machinery is not in place. What all obligations or responsibilities are cast upon governments, let's say central government, state government, local authorities, and schools and parents and guardians?
So, Hemant, there is a full section in this Act which very clearly enunciates what are the responsibilities and duties of government. So, the first and foremost, of course, is that you have to provide a school in the neighborhood where children can easily access from the age group of 6 to 14 for their education. So, that is one. The second is that there has to be a provision for funding and maintaining the school system.
I see.
So, and this is something unique in this Act because the central government also has an onus to be able to help the state governments. And the central government can provide funds either programmatically targeted way, or it can assist the state in a more generic way, which often happens when we get awards from the Finance Commission and so on.
Right, right.
Then the onus also is on the central government to be able to set up a national curriculum framework.
Right.
So that is required, and that is again something which the governments do. And the last one that the central government, the onus rests on them is for teacher qualifications. So what are the standards which you want teachers to maintain? That's very relevant.
That's very relevant.
So these are some of the key features with the central government. State governments in their turn, and if you remember that school education is actually a subject which is directly implemented by the states. So the states have their own onus as to provide that school, to provide funding, and also to be able to recruit and deploy teachers in a certain standard with certain norms.
Right.
So that is the other, and then all the wherewithals additionally which go into a proper school infrastructure.
I see.
So that rests largely with the states. But this is a responsibility which they also share with local governments. So some places the states have devolved powers for school education management to Panchayati Raj institutions, Zilla Parishads or village level committees and so on. So there are differences of this kind in our country. Now municipal establishments have their own responsibility in urban areas for schools.
And Zilla Parishads
and Zilla Parishads are the rural devolved role which the states have delegated to them. So this is the apparatus which basically manages and is responsible for setting up those schools with norms, setting up standards, making sure that children's admission processes, the calendar of the school, so on and so forth. But lastly, I'd like to mention Hemant is a very important duty which has also been cast on parents.
Yes.
Which they must send their child to school. The 6 to 14 age group, they must admit them into schools. And similarly on teachers, there is a duty cast in this Act which says that they must be punctual, they must be regular, they must complete the syllabus, complete the curricula which they are assigned for that class, assess the child, keep the parents informed about the child's progress, and so on.
But, how does one ensure that parents actually send their children to school? I mean, if we were to take account of weaker section or parents where children help in household work and even in their day-to-day earning capabilities.
So that's a very good question, Hemant. In fact, one of the duties is that the state will create special facilities to ensure that weaker sections and disadvantaged sections of society get full access to schooling. So there are a lot of provisions in that, and which may be programmatic. You may help children with incentives, with scholarships, and so on. But you have to ensure that the poverty angle is offset by many other incentives that you can bring their way. And so that is a very important part of this act. And you have heard of a section called 12(1)(c), which is that even private schools, the act says that at entry point, 25% children have to be from disadvantaged groups and weaker sections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, a comprehensive and collective elementary education is not merely desirable, but imperative for strengthening the social fabric of democracy through provision of equal opportunities. Even prior to the insertion of Article 21A, the directive principles of state policy, as included in our Constitution, laid down quite specifically, as Geeta was mentioning, through Articles 39F and Article 45, about the state's sense of duty for providing equitable and accessible education. Geeta, Vrinda ji was mentioning about the whole mechanism of responsibilities and obligations which are cast upon government and schools and teachers as well. Would you like to supplement and tell us more about this whole setup of obligations and responsibilities, especially in, about schools and teachers?
So, I think this enactment is laudatory insofar as it aims to provide a free and compulsory education, elementary education till the age of 14, and then casts a duty upon teachers to be doing their work, to do it diligently, to be well qualified, to be trained, to look after the overall development of the children, to ensure that schools are run in a manner which will be conducive to the child. What I also found appreciable is that it is seeking to take care of children with disabilities. Unfortunately, we have miles to go before we actually achieve that.
Right.
If we can achieve this free and compulsory education and bring all the children into the net, at least we are taking some steps.
Absolutely.
We need to take much more. We need to educate our teachers much more.
Yes.
And that has been one of the purposes of the Act. So I think the enactment has a very laudatory goal. It is also seeking to ensure that, for example, exams. You have examination, but you will normally not hold back a child. You may hold back a child for 2 months in class 5, grade 5 or grade 8, but you will try and ensure that after 2 months, you reassess the child.
I see.
You try and do special facilities for a child who may be lagging behind his
Right.
others. So the attempt at inclusiveness and yet at ensuring that those who are lagging behind are not named and shamed,
Right.
but are being helped. Now, a lot will depend on the individual teachers. As we say, train the judges,
Yes.
and you have a continuous education. You train the
You
teachers.
need to upgrade the teachers.
It also says there should be no capitation fees.
Right.
And that was reiterated by Supreme Court in its own way in that Mohini Jain case. I don't know how much we've achieved that, but that's in higher education. So you are trying to ensure
Yes.
that the enactment makes sure that they can't take capitation, that
Yes.
you can't be taking extra money, you can't be making money on the side.
Absolutely, yes.
You have to be concentrating on your duty.
Which all schools are actually covered under this act? Because we have private schools, public schools, government schools, aided schools, non-aided schools, NGO schools. Which all schools are covered under this act?
All schools are covered in this, wherever there is classes 1 to 8. And the dispensation is very clear. Government schools are there. And, the lexicon is basically there are government schools, which in any case have free education available for all children. The second is a set of aided schools, which are fairly large number in this country.
Right.
And those aided schools also take in children exactly as the way government schools do,
Right.
And with the disadvantaged sections, etc. And then because they are funded partly by government, so they basically go by what the government rules are.
Right.
And the third set are the exclusively private schools, which are not funded by government, not aided. And these schools function as per, but their normative structure after the RTE Act is also the same.
Right.
They will also have school management committees, so on and so forth. But they will also have under, as I mentioned earlier, that at entry level, they are also compelled to take 25% children from weaker sections and disadvantaged groups.
Well, it is time to move into a very short break. Please don't go anywhere, as we'll be back soon.
सुप्रभात,
आपके साथ दिन की शुरुआत
चाय की चुस्की
और हर छोटी बड़ी खबर का स्वाद।
करियर,
टेक,
फाइनेंस की होगी क्लास,
कलाकार बोलने आएंगे
मुस्कुराहटों की मिठास।
देखिए
नए कलेवर में रंगा इंडिया। हेलो इंडिया,
सोमवार से शनिवार सुबह 8 बजे सिर्फ संसद टीवी पर।
Welcome back after the break. You're watching our exclusive series on 75 years laws that shaped India. Today we are deliberating a particularly significant law passed by the Parliament for giving effect to the fundamental right of education to all children. The law is known as the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009. Before continuing with our discussion, let us look at the legislative journey of this act, including its amendments.
At the first instance, the Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Bill 2008 was introduced in the Rajya Sabha by the government on 15th December 2008. The bill was referred to Standing Committee on HRD, chaired by Janardhan Dwivedi on December 18, 2008. The committee submitted its report on February 18, 2009. Subsequently, the revised 2009 bill was passed by the Rajya Sabha on 28 July 2009 and the Lok Sabha on 4th of August 2009. The bill received the President's assent on 26 August 2009. And the law came into force on 1st of April 2010 as notified in the Official Gazette of the Government of India. Until now, the Act has undergone 3 amendments in the years 2012, 2017 and 2019. Let us see some of the significant debates in the Parliament on the said Act.
अब स्टेट की जिम्मेदारी सुनिश्चित करने के लिए पेरेंट्स की जिम्मेदारी नहीं है, लेकिन स्टेट की जिम्मेदारी है। हालांकि हम लोग देर से आए हैं, लेकिन दुरुस्त आए हैं।
कि सर्व शिक्षा अभियान का जो लक्ष्य है इस विधेयक के द्वारा समाहित इसमें या दोनों समानांतर चलेगा, ये आपको जब विधेयक पर आप मतदान लेंगे तो इसको आपको साफ करना होगा।
जैसे ट्राइबल एरिया होता है, आदिवासी एरिया होता है, वहाँ अगर गांव के लिए जाने के लिए रास्ते नहीं है, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी नहीं है, तो वहाँ ना टीचर जाते हैं, ना बच्चे और कहाँ शिक्षा लेने के लिए जा सकते हैं।
This particular law is in the context of Article 21A of the Constitution. The 86th constitutional amendment said that we must bring a law to provide free and compulsory education for children between the age of 6 and 14. So naturally the law that is to be enacted is with reference to 6 and 14. But where the state governments want that, yes, preschool education can be given, they should provide for it, and we have set it out in Section 11.
The Minister may now move that the bill be passed.
That the bill be passed.
The question is that the bill be passed. Those in favor may say aye. Those against may say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted and the bill is passed.
Vrinda ji, we saw debates predominantly with regard to the statute passage in 2009. And there have been 3 amendments post 2009 in 2012, 17 and 19. And they have been important amendments, about detention policy and minorities, etc. So can you tell our viewers about these amendments?
So 2012, taking that first, is largely, what was called by us in the ministry as housekeeping details, because, there are always some gaps in the legislation,
right,
which immediately you realize as it rolls out. So some of those corrections were done. And so 2012 is largely one of those, lots of changes. For some places, for instance, the timeline hadn't been mentioned, so a timeline was added. Some places, like the SMC was a catch-all provision, the School Management Committee. But obviously, there were aided schools, there were private schools who had their own systems of, so there the SMC was then made as an advisory capacity. 2017, I think the most major, clause in that, which was basically we had hoped that teachers would all get their requisite qualifications by that time.
Right.
And that had not happened because, some states were not endowed with so many training institutions. There were a larger number of teachers had to be trained. So one of the major 2017 amendments was for extending that time period for teachers to get their full compliance of their educational qualifications.
Right.
Private schools had a lot of problems. So 2017 was is major amendment in that sense. But it is the 2019 amendment which I think went a long way.
Yes, that was
in signaling 2 things. One was that, learning outcomes matter and that examinations are important and whether you will allow detention or not.
Yes.
So this was the key area. There was a committee which had gone into it, which had several state representatives and all, academics, educationists. And those recommendations were processed and then this amendment after much deliberation was brought out. So what this amendment basically, even the earlier act did not prevent you from holding examinations as long as it was not an external board exam.
Correct.
But at elementary level, there were many states who didn't do board exams, but some did.
Right.
So what this amendment has said is that at class 5, which is the end of your primary cycle, and class 8, which is the end of your elementary school cycle, you will be tested. And if you are not, clearing those exams, as Geeta rightly said
she had touched
upon that issue, that you must help that child to be able to cope better and be able to clear his exams so that his understanding, his learning levels really match up to whatever you are expecting at the end of that class. What it said was that you can detain them even if after that 2 months effort, extra additional help given to the child is not able to cope, you can detain him as you would deem appropriate in those circumstances and help him her to clear the exam subsequently. So this was the major amendment, but it is also signaling that you must watch learning outcomes of children.
That's true. And the Act also provides for a curriculum and evaluation procedure, Geeta. If you would like to say something about it.
Yes. So, with regard to curriculum and the procedure, I feel it's really trying to build the child. It's really trying to create and develop all the qualities in the child. So the potential of the child may be brought out. the child may have good values, the child may have, say, physical and mental development, all things which you feel that education is not about academics alone. Education is about the overall growth of the child.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think that's what the enactment seeks to bring in. Of course, it's saying as far as practical, you should have it in the mother tongue of the child. It says you develop the abilities of the child, you see the mental, physical development of the child.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you give a certificate which says that he has completed his elementary education.
Right.
And in a sense, it's bringing a fruition to what the child has done from age 6 to age 14, which is the age of elementary education.
There is also one chapter which is on the sidelines, I would say, but still very important, chapter 6, which deals with protection of child rights in terms of education. Would you like to quickly touch upon that? And
So with regard to the protection of child rights, there are and there is firstly an entitlement of the parent or somebody who is aggrieved to seek redressal. That is one. Then you do have the National Commission for Child Rights. You have the state commissions. So
Right.
you have mechanisms which are seeking to protect rights of children.
children.
And of course, in those, you have qualifications to come on those committees.
Right.
So there is a lot of effort and attempt being made that we do nurture our children and we make them into responsible and good human beings.
Thank you, Geeta. It's time to take the viewer's question now. This time the question has come from a parent and teacher, Parul Soyal. Let's listen in.
What will happen if a child is not able to clear elementary education by the age of 14? Will education be free for such a student even after 14 years of age?
Vrinda, would you like to take this question?
Yes, it would be free. If you read section 4, it clearly says that even if the child is, he can be, you said 6 years is the age of entry, but it does not bar entry for any age group which has not accessed education.
I see.
So you may be a dropout or you may be a never enrolled child.
And you may be beyond 14.
And you are fitted, of course, in an age appropriate class.
That's
But you will need special efforts.
right.
And it provides for what they call special training,
Right.
where you can give the child, all the wherewithal of catching up with that learning level,
Right.
and assist her to be able to move forward
Right.
in the stream of education. So you could do that, and if that takes you beyond 14, that's fine too. It says
I
you
see.
will continue to be, helped with under this act, and till you complete your elementary education.
Well, there are still many questions in my mind. But as they say, that discipline requires showing respect to the timelines. Hence, we must bid goodbye now on a note that the right to education works as a building block in a child's trajectory to attain quality elementary education. And we all must encourage our children in that endeavor. Thank you so much, Vrinda, Sarup, Geeta, Luthra, for being on this expert panel and sharing your knowledgeable views. Thank you all the viewers as well for watching this series. You can send your feedback at Sansad TV at sansad.nic.in. You can also connect with us on various other social media platforms. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and season's greetings.